You set foot on foreign soil. Only this land isn't ruled by any country or government. In this land we celebrate music. In this land we celebrate games. In this land we celebrate those who compose video game music. Welcome to the VGMbassy. Welcome and thanks for tuning in to another episode of the VGMbassy. This is a show centered around video game music and the amazing online community of fans and podcasters that enjoy it. My name's Ed, and on each episode I'll take the role of Prime VGM Minister and invite a guest VG Ambassador onto the show to share with us their own video game music culture. Or I may share a part of my culture on a solo show. Oh my god, that's the first time I've ever done that, without reading it.
Good job.
Completely from memory. I mean, I've done it 80-something times by now, so I would hope that I could get it through. Anyways, welcome everyone. This is a very special episode of the VGMbassy because it is tied in very closely with my other podcast, the Arcane Machine, and as I'm sure you've heard a very familiar voice laughing along with me, Justin Schneider from XVGM Radio is here with me.
Hey, how's it going?
We are doing quite well, sir. Thank you for hanging out. This is so, like I said, we're kind of pulling double duty. This is going to be a show that is released on both the Arcane Machine and VGMbassy feeds, but we're doing separate intros for each one. And then the outro will be a little different too, where I thank all the patrons at the end of the show, and that won't be on the Arcane Machine one. So if you do listen to both shows, you don't have to listen to both this time around. 90% of the show will probably be the same, but not a lot of people listen to Arcane Machine, so I figured we'll get as many ears as possible on it because we've got a really cool theme today.
Yeah. So today, Ed and I are going to talk about video game music that could be on our Arcane Machine show.
Exactly.
Gothic, industrial, dark wave, dark underground music, which is what we talk about on Arcane Machine.
Yeah, exactly. And we've got some great tunes here. If you don't listen to the Arcane Machine and you enjoy the tracks that we're picking on this particular show, you might want to go check it out because there will be a lot of similar sounding stuff. Industrial music is somewhat prevalent in video games. I know, I have the industrial music channel on my VGMbassy Discord, and there's always a lot of people in there, posting samples of music going, is this industrial? And I feel like the guru going, well, this is kind of industrial. Well, this might not be industrial. And then sharing some stuff that, is similar, but is actually genuinely in the industrial vein of things. So we're going to hear some great examples of what I feel are true industrial tunes in VGM. We've got some synthwave in here, at least one goth song. You've got some good stuff too. What was your picking experience like for the show?
Yeah, so I initially went in, I had a brief idea of picking Gothic industrial tracks that were just licensed on a game, and immediately went, that's a cop-out. So then I was going to try to pick 2 tracks by artists that our listeners would know, and this can kind of go on either show, because on Arcane Machine it's 2 artists that would be known in the world of Gothic industrial darkwave, and then 2 tracks that were more VGM centered, and on VGMbassy it just reversed. 2 tracks that people who listen to the show might know the artist because they're VGM composers, et cetera. So it ended up not being quite that, but that was my initial approach, and then I tweaked it from there because I didn't like one of the tracks that I picked.
That makes sense. That's kind of what I felt too. I wanted to pick what I felt were really good examples of the music and not necessarily limit myself in terms of patterns of picking or anything like that.
Right.
One composer which you would expect from me, and you would probably scratch your head if he wasn't on there. a couple of other, actually two composers you would probably expect from me, to be honest with you, and then two that might be a surprise, one of which was really a surprise, because after we had decided to do this show, I was playing this completely unrelated game, and in the middle of this game, this song popped up, and I was like, this song is just absolutely perfect. I have to add it into the show. So I'm excited to share it with you guys, and that'll be coming up in a little bit.
Now I'm curious what game that was, 'cause I'm just looking, I'm like, huh.
Yeah, no, we'll get there eventually, and there's a cool story behind it. So, but anyways, so let's get on with our first track of the day. What do you have for us, Justin?
All right, so this is going to be from a game called VirtuaVerse that came out in 2020. I have it on Steam, and I'm sure it's on a number of other things, but I just know it's on Steam. The artist is Master Boot Record, and the track is rdrone.
Sweet. Welcome back. That was Master Boot Record with the track rdrone.
from their 2020 game, VirtuaVerse. And you can find that on PC, Steam, I think it's on GOG, and a number of other things. Not sure if it made it over to Switch, PS4, or any of those, but worth a look.
Yeah, it's pretty much on everything, I think. Cool game, pixel art, kind of a point-and-click, very cyber city... Losing my train of thought. What do they call that genre?
Cyberpunk. Yes. Very, very cyberpunk. I found this one. I'm trying to remember if I found Master Boot Record first or if I found this game first. I think I found them both very close to each other. And I was looking for cyberpunk games on Steam. I mean, there's a game called Cloudpunk that I grabbed. There's this. Ghost Runner, I think, was another one. Obviously, Cyberpunk. Wow, what's
2077.
2077, there you go. I don't know why I was going to say 2044. I think that might have been the tabletop RPG, 2044. Oh, that whole genre is a lot of fun. It goes all the way back to what was Shadowrun back in the day.
Yeah.
So I was looking for something to scratch that cyberpunk itch before I had a machine that could actually play Cyberpunk 2077, and I wanted something that was not so graphically intensive. And it's great. I haven't gotten that far in it, but it's exactly what I wanted out of this type of a game, like a point-and-click mystery game. It feels very like King's Quest type of a thing, except far, far better graphics, and obviously a much different soundtrack. A lot of the soundtrack is very like this kind of wall of sound thing. It's what Master Boot Record tends to do. I mean, if you look at the audio bars of
the waveform of the
the waveform of most of his stuff, like you get the where it'll grow in volume, but then it's just like a wall of sound for most of it.
It's all very intense all the way through.
Yes.
Yeah, this is a very aggressive synthwave. I wouldn't say so much industrial. It's because the beats are fairly dancey. There's no real distortion on anything except for that lead kind of guitarish synth, which kind of trades off nicely with that more rounded kind of bellish synth. So it goes back and forth between something that's really aggressive and something that's a little more pretty, and I like that a lot.
Yeah, like I said, a lot of the soundtrack is very much like there's a lot of flow and form throughout all of it. This track I actually haven't heard in the game yet, so I'm guessing it happens during some kind of like a car chase or something, maybe a bike chase, motor drone. I don't know what that word actually means.
Yeah, I was thinking like a chase scene or like something that happens like in a club or something like that. It's got a very high energy. I played a little bit of the game too, probably almost as much as you did, just kind of like through the intro a while ago. And yeah, his music it's a tough fit with a point and click, because with a point and click game, you're kind of sitting on static screens for a while trying to figure things out, and it's hard to do that if you've got music like this pounding in your ears.
Yeah.
So there are a few tracks where he slows it down a little bit.
Yeah, I was just going to say there are some tracks that are a little bit more atmospheric, because you wouldn't be able to concentrate with this kind of going nonstop at you.
It's like when you have to turn the volume down in your car to find the right driveway to pull into.
Pretty much, yeah. And I mean, as we've heard on the Arcane Machine previously with this artist, I mean, his stuff tends to be really aggressive, and I mean, I think he classifies it as like synthesized heavy metal, synthesized black metal, but like everything in there is a synthesized sound. It's not like real drums, real guitars, real anything. So and a lot of that sound kind of brings me back to like the Sid Chip C64 era. There's a lot of that's in there that's really crunchy and grindy, which I like in a lot of my both Dark Underground and VGM.
Perfect fit.
Yeah, that's about it from this. I mean, as far as Master Boot Record goes, this is the only game that they've done. Everything else in their discography is just this synthesized heavy metal stuff.
Yeah, and sometimes he does like synth metal covers of other metal songs and stuff too. So
yes, actually, in fact, I should mention, if you check out his SoundCloud, you'll find a quote-unquote secret album called Whereas, where it's all just covers of songs from other video games. Like the Doom song is in there, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's about it for me on that. What do you got coming in?
All right, so one of the two composers probably people are expecting from me is Danish composer Jesper Kyd, and he's well known for composing games in the Assassin's Creed series, Hitman, a lot of Genesis, Sega Genesis and Master System games way back in the day. His newest soundtrack is from the game Darktide, which is part of the Warhammer 40k series, and this is a track called Disposal Unit Imperium Mix, and this is a really good example of very heavy, aggressive industrial music. Let's rock. All right, unlace those marching boots. That was Disposal Unit Imperium mix by Jesper Kyd from the game Darktide, Warhammer 40K, which was released last year in 2022. I really like this track. Kind of reminds me a little bit of like Laibach a little bit. What was your take on it, Justin?
Yeah, Laibach for sure. The beat kind of reminded me of something that like Trent Reznor would do. Maybe some
like a March of the Pigs kind of a thing.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. I got a little bit of Nine Inch Nails off of that, and the rest was just. I was kind of getting lost in like I'm not sure if the vocals were in an actual language or if they were nonsense or like what do people call the like Simlish?
Yeah, like just gibberish.
Yeah. But like I was hearing that and kind of getting the sense like so I'm not really into the Warhammer 40K universe. I have a few friends that play the the tabletops and stuff. It's just I've looked at it and there's so much lore and so much stuff. I'm just like I can't. I will get lost in this. I cannot do this. So like I know that like Imperium mix referring to the Imperium of Man, which is one of the factions in 40K, and so just because they're humans doesn't mean they speak English. So it could be any one of the human languages, or I just wasn't sure if they were actually using a language there. So that added to kind of like the creepy factor of it, which I find a lot of the Imperium of Man stuff is very creepy. And then like that violin at the end, like it sounded kind of hoarse. It added like this extra eeriness to the song towards the end.
Yeah,
just like
they're scratching the bow across the violin like horizontally instead of the proper way.
And I'm just like, oh, that's creepy. I like it. It's properly creepy.
Yeah, and it's just a little bit of like kids or orchestral compositions poking through in this otherwise really brutal martial industrial tune. If you go on the Warhammer subreddit dedicated to this game, there's a post where people are trying to discern what those vocals are, and everybody's got a list of different 3-syllable words. None of them corroborate with each other, so it's just too buried in the mix to really tell. But it sounds really cool. Obviously you have those kind of choir choral vocals coming up at the end of it. And I don't know, it's just really, really good stuff. You can find the full soundtrack on YouTube in one long video. And YouTube, the way they do it now, if you're watching on a computer, it kind of shows you a grid of like the most listened to parts of the video if it's a really long one. There's like a little gray bar that goes up and down. And for this song, like the bar goes way, way up. Like this is the most watched song out of the whole. So it's definitely a favorite in the entire soundtrack. I originally wanted to pick a much earlier song from Kyd. I wanted to share some older kind of chiptune stuff. There was a track from a game he composed. It was a Batman and Robin game on the Mega Drive. That was really good. But when I started digging deeper into more of the music he composed, I hadn't really researched his stuff since this game had come out. And like I said, when I heard the song, I was like, yeah, this is great. I'm definitely gonna put this one in because it definitely fits. I don't really know anything about Warhammer 40K. You know more than I do, so I don't have much to talk about as far as the game goes. But Kyd has kind of dabbled in and out of industrial and dark dance and electro throughout his entire career. And even when he's doing more like orchestral pieces of music for like Borderlands or the Assassin's Creed series, he still manages to throw in some cool little, distorted arps and stuff within all the violins and stuff. He's kind of kicking to his electronic roots there through the whole thing. And I think that's what kind of sets him apart from a lot of the other AAA composers. Yeah.
No, that's fair. Actually, I think I bought one of his Assassin's Creed soundtracks, most likely either 2 or one of the spin-offs of 2, the one with Ezio, all set in Italy. It's a fun game, and the soundtrack to those games didn't really sound anything like this, but they were great soundtracks. And because of like the mixture of the period stuff in like the 1500s or whenever it is and the modern day stuff, there is plenty of kind of room for him to do this classical orchestral stuff and mix it with more electronic stuff on the other end when you're in like the quote unquote real world or the modern. It's not even modern times. I think it's set in like somewhat futuristic. So didn't even think of that until you brought it up. I was like, oh yeah, no, he does get a pretty good range on those games. So
yeah, and I think that's probably why they picked him for it too, because it does. They needed somebody that could do period pieces, but also kind of get that technology feel. Because even when you're in the past, you're technically in a simulation of the past. So there's little glitches that pop up here and there. So that music fits really well. But Warhammer, it's like it's all kind of not necessarily futuristic, but otherworldly. There's a lot of gritty technology. There's a lot of brutalism and very brutal architecture. So this kind of a song really fits well with that atmosphere.
Agreed.
All right, so what you got next?
All right, so next we're going to go into a game that is somewhat of a favorite of mine, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. The game came out in 2004 on PC. The music for the game, aside from the licensed stuff, because there is typo and a whole bunch of licensed music in the game, but the score was done by Rick Schaffer. So this is the main theme for Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, specifically the Aggro mix, which is on the soundtrack and played at some point in the game. All right, that was the main theme, specifically the Aggro mix from Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, game that came out in 2004 and was scored by Rick Schaffer.
Yeah, okay. So when I was looking at the screen while we were playing the music, it said 2019 on there, and I was like, this is not a 2019 track. Like, this reminds me of late 90s industrial rock. Yeah. Not even industrial rock, really, but kind of like post-goth rock or something like that.
I was going to say electro-industrial, aggro-industrial.
Jesus and Mary Chain, like that kind of stuff. It had that vibe to it. So 2004 makes it feel much more authentic and not like what might have been a throwback to...
No, the 2019 I think is when the track was ripped or something.
Oh, I got you.
Not sure what that was, but definitely not from 2019. This is on the soundtrack, which I don't think the soundtrack was released the same year. I think it was really shortly after. But like I said, this mix was on the soundtrack and was included in the game. And I mean, the main theme is in there. You hear primarily the main theme, but a lot of that electronic stuff that you're hearing was not in the original main theme, which is what makes this the aggro mix.
Makes sense. So it's a little more aggressive.
Yes,
essentially.
Exactly.
Cool. Yeah, I dug it. That kind of like hip hop sampled beat, but kind of distorted and like with the low end dropped out of it. Mm-hmm. Very typical for that era. Just the guitars that are kind of almost guitar, but maybe might be a synth. It's also really cool. It felt like a very authentic, like, well, I told you when we first started listening to it, it reminded me of a lot of the tracks that were on the Crow soundtrack, which I absolutely love and kind of became a template for a lot of the music that I enjoyed afterwards. And this kind of like really hit those marks.
Oh, nice. Yeah, no, I get a lot of that feeling from this. The soundtrack or the score for Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines is fairly similar. I feel like the Crow influenced a lot of the Gothic subculture, and especially the stuff that got popular after it came out. 1990? 4? Yeah. So it does not surprise me at all that there is, a little bit of that flavor in this because, I know almost everybody that I played Vampire the Masquerade, the tabletop or Mind's Eye Theater game with, were all into the Crow. So like that I feel like there was a lot of influence regardless. So, and then Rick Schaffer does both real live music and video game music. I don't know why I make that specific distinction, but he was part of a band called Tomorrow's Child, and they did a lot of like progressive metal, progressive rock, glam rock, hard rock, heavy metal. They were active from 1987 to 1992. Also a band called Engines of Aggression, which I couldn't really find any information on. And he has his own discography for, the Tomorrow's Child, Engines of Aggression, another solo prog rock project called Nectar. Like he's got a lot of stuff just out there in the like regular music world. And then if you look at what he's done in the video game music world, like that's a huge resume as well. I'm not going to do like I do on XVGM Radio and go on and on. I'll just to throw a couple of games out there. He started out, looks like, with Red Asphalt in 1998, but X-Men Legends in 2004. I think it was a PSP game, if I remember, the Diablo-esque X-Men games.
Oh yes.
Spider-Man 2 in 2005, Gothic 3 in 2006. I mean, that's an appropriate name. And he's still doing work with like the Doom Eternal series. He's doing a lot of like voice editorial and post as opposed to like soundtrack stuff, but like he is still active in the video game music world.
Cool. Spider-Man 2, that was also the one that KMFDM worked on, right?
I think so. The thing that I remember Spider-Man 2 for is like it was like the best up until the more recent one that just came out for the PS4, PS5.
Yeah.
Like Spider-Man 2 was like the baseline for web swinging and fun like Spider-Man games for a long time.
Yeah, I think KMFDM worked on that as well. So that's cool. That's another kind of
crossover
connection he has with the scene. Neat. So the rest of the soundtrack, is it in this vein, or?
Yeah, it's very like it's got that same kind of like it could be in the Crow feel.
Nice,
which is great, and it's what kind of the game itself plays like. It's a very open world game. I think if I remember correctly, there's like 5 different endings you can get. You can play as most of the more popular vampire clans from the Vampire the Masquerade tabletop game. There's a handful that you can't play as for various reasons in the game, but like. Was it Bruja, Tremere, Gangrel, Malkavian, Nosferatu? Like the main vampire clans are all there. And what was the story? So the story is you become a vampire right at the beginning of the game, and then your sire is immediately put on trial and killed for creating a vampire when he shouldn't have.
Oh, sure, like a little orphan.
Yeah, basically. And then they're like, well, you didn't do anything wrong, so we're not going to kill you, but we're also not going to help you. So. Survive. Yeah, basically. And then one of these other vampires was like, I'll help you get out of here because there's stuff going on, and then you just kind of have to like put the pieces together as like what was going on with the guy that turned you into a vampire, and what's going on with like the vampire society in, I want to say it's like San Francisco, somewhere in California, I believe.
Cool.
It's a very deep game, and there's a sequel that's supposed to be coming out soon. It's supposed to come out last year, but it keeps getting delayed. Bloodlines 2.
That's COVID for you.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll have a good soundtrack too.
And Rick Schaffer is working on that as well.
Sweet. Always up for more Crow music.
Exactly. All right, where are we going next?
All right, we are going to the small fictional German town of Trüberbrook. And this is a very interesting. This is probably the only example of goth music we're going to have. And it's goth in the sense of like Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds more than it is like Sisters of Mercy. Very, very unique song, very cool song. This is called Then I'll Make You Mine by the band From Another Place from the game Trüberbrook. This was released in 2019.
Whispers in the distance, and the
Okay, that was Then I'll Make You Mine, or at least that's the title I'm assigning it, because that seems to be a theme for the song. It doesn't really have a name. By a fictional band called The Band from Another Place, from the game Trüberbrook. This was a point-and-click adventure game, very similar to VirtuaVerse in genre, but not in theme,
right.
Released in 2019. And this was the one that I was talking about, where I wasn't particularly playing this game looking for music to put in the show, but once I heard it, I was like, oh, this is going to work really, really well.
Yeah, that's sinister in kind of its sound, which I really like. But I mean, he's talking about needing help forgetting you to make you hit. Like,
that's what I wanted to talk about that with you, because I was like, I don't know what to make of those lyrics. It's like, if you've done me wrong, but if you can make me forget that you've done me wrong, then I'll be with you again, or something. Like, it was like, erase the memories of erase my negative memories of you so we can be back together again. Which it says so much in like 2 sentences. It's a really cool combination of lyrics.
And
I like the whole theme of the whole thing. The way the music appears in the game is that, let's start from the beginning. So the game is a point-and-click adventure that takes a lot of ideas from like David Lynch, like Twin Peaks specifically.
Oh, okay.
So you're a physicist who won a trip to this small town of Trüberbrook in Germany. It's a fictional town, to the 1960s. And he shows up and he just wants to see the sights and the sounds, but weird things start happening. But every time he sees something interesting, he whips out his little handheld tape recorder and starts talking to Beverly, who we never actually meet. Just kind of like Diane in the Twin Peaks series. So immediately you're like, okay, there's some parallels here. And then there's some like alternate dimension stuff and some weird things. I don't want to spoil too much if anybody is interested in playing the game. But at one point you end up finding this like distillery in the basement of the hotel that you're staying at. Through gathering all the materials and a little bit of hallucinogenic mushrooms, you give it to this guy that's sitting on the stage in the center of town where there's a festival going on, and he takes it from you, and then they all get up on stage, and that's when this song plays. It's kind of like towards the end of the game. So it's just a really interesting, I was not expecting it at all. The game itself is kind of lighthearted, mostly like, humorous, like most of these games are. The cool thing about the game, though, is that they made small dioramas of all the locations, and like physical real life dioramas, and then they did 3D topographical scans of the locations, and then turn that into 3-dimensional models in the game. So all the environments are kind of photorealistic, but move as if they're actual like 3D objects. It's a really cool effect, and the game looks gorgeous because of it. So it's just a very unique, very atmospheric kind of game. As they are playing this song in the during the festival, you get prompts, and you can choose the next verse that you want the band to sing. This is parallels like you were talking about when I shared on Arcane Machine. I shared a song from Junebug from the game Kentucky Route Zero, which is almost identical. And Kentucky Route Zero also has some David Lynch elements as well. And especially like the 3rd season of Twin Peaks, the one that just came out a couple years ago, there's musical interludes like in the 3rd act of every single one. And I think they're kind of aping off of that to put a musical act in there, towards the end of each of their games.
Oh, neat.
The music is usually very ethereal and kind of cosmic, and I get those themes from both the Junebug and Band from Another Place stuff. So it's very cool. The only place you can find this song, it's not on the official soundtrack. It's not anywhere except for a YouTube video, which is kind of a lower quality video. So I had to dig into the game's files and found the song in pieces, because you have to select the next part. So it's all pieces, but not only is it in pieces, but it's also individual stems. The drums are separate from the accordion, from the keyboard. So I literally had to assemble like 100 different pieces of this song, and all three, there's like 12 different segments, each having 5 or 6 different instruments. So by the time I was done, I had this like gigantic mess in my audio workstation that played the entire song. And then, so what I'm going to do for the show is kind of pick out my favorite parts and play like a progression of the song that you might find in the actual game. Yeah, absolutely crazy. I basically had to mix and master the whole song again.
Wow.
Why they kept the individual stems is beyond me. They could have easily just had each segment as one mixed down track.
Yeah.
So I don't know. But anyways, just a really cool tune. The band from Another Place is made up of Sebastian Kiefer, Benedict Graham, Stefan Brunton, and Christian Zeppelin. They are not a band in and of themselves. They are separate musical artists that kind of came together to do this one particular song for the game. They are not even the composers of the full game soundtrack. That's a separate individual.
Right.
So this is the only place where they all appear together. And I did kind of like try to Google some of them, and it's difficult because it's mostly German websites, and it's hard to. The game was developed by Germans, so I found a couple of instances where, like, you know, one guy's like the drummer in another band, but it was difficult to kind of like make out what was going on. So I don't have too much information on there, unfortunately, but I was happy that I was able to share this really cool tune with some people.
Yeah, that was interesting. I'm curious now more about like all the verses. We saw three verses, and each one had 3 different options, so that's at least 9 different possibilities. That you string a lot together. It's a really long song.
I did. I strung them all together, and the song was 12 and a half minutes long.
Oh my God, that's almost as long as a Typo Negative track.
Yeah, I think the version I'm sharing on the show is just under 7 minutes. So, you know, we cut it down by about half.
Yeah, wow. That's crazy. That's really awesome, though.
Yeah, very, very unique song. And if this developer does any more games in the future, I'm interested to see if they do any, you know, that bring these guys together to do any more musical pieces. That would be kind of fun. Yeah,
I mean, for that track specifically, I also kind of like how the whole thing was more or less whispered.
Yeah.
Like, whisper sung. We've talked about it before on the Arcane Machine, and it's an interesting way to do things, and when it's done right, like there, it really works, and it adds just a kind of another layer of either creepy or intense, depending on the lyrics.
Yeah, and I feel like the very slight Eastern European accent made it even... But he almost sounded a little bit like Christopher Lambert, I think. He's got that kind of a gritty Eastern European voice. Yeah. So I was kind of envisioning like Raiden from Mortal Kombat singing the song.
That's fair.
Anyways, all right. So I'm ready to move on to our next track. You got a classic one coming up.
Yeah. This one, I'm taking us all the way back to the year 1999. I was still in high school and playing games like Unreal Tournament. So this is going to be from Unreal Tournament. The soundtrack to this game was composed by a number of different people. This track, though, this is Razorback, the Unreal mix, was done by Peter Hajba. All right, you were listening to Razorback, the Unreal Mix, and that came from the 1999 game Unreal Tournament. The artists on the Unreal Tournament game were Tero Kosterma, Daniel Gardopi, Kai Eric Kompa, Alexander Brandon, Peter Hodgba, Andrew G. Sega, and Mitchell Vandenbos. This track was specifically done by Peter Hodgba, who also goes by the name Skaven. Skaven. He is a Finnish electronic musician.
Gotcha. This track went all over the place.
Yes.
I was getting vibes from like the Quake 2 soundtrack, Sasha Dikisian, Sonic Mayhem, basically just, straight up guitar and drums, kind of a metal thing going on. Some breakbeat came in, and I was like, oh, this is a little like pitch shifter. And then there were some like more twinkly keyboards that reminded me of the original Unreal soundtrack. And then some more dustled beat. It was like things just kept piling on, and I was like, this is changing and morphing into different genres. And it's cool because I think, with this game, you're going to be hearing this particular piece a lot, and you're going to be playing, these maps quite a bit. So
right.
It's good that it kind of morphs into different things because it keeps your ears interested.
Right. You don't just kind of get tone deaf to it after a brief time, like short loops and stuff. Yeah. So this is a game that I liked a lot, which is interesting because I was never really big on first-person shooters. I still say that I'm not big on first-person shooters, even though the one game that I think I play the most of right now is a first-person shooter, so whatever. But
it's your destiny, one might say.
Oh, that's... because it's Destiny 2. Anyway, my friends back in these days played a lot of like Half-Life, Counter-Strike, stuff like that. So I mean, we had LAN parties and I would play in those, but I was never really big on a lot of first-person shooters, probably because everybody else was better than me and I was just like frustrated. But when I went to college, I had played Unreal Tournament a handful of times. When I went to college, I met some friends that really enjoyed the game, and so we ended up playing it more, and it was just a lot more fun. I don't know if it was just a different group of people, if it was a different game, because I hadn't really played this one specifically much until college. But my junior year of college, we threw an official LAN party in the computer room. We got to take it over for a weekend, and we got sponsored by Red Bull, so there was a lot of Red Bull, and we installed Unreal Tournament on all the computers and had just a crazy tournament.
Cool.
Yeah,
that sounds fun.
Yeah, it was a good time. So music like this was, something that like was kind of always in my ears, and I never really picked up on it because, like, as much as I liked video game music back then, it was never something that I really did a lot of research into. And so, I mean, it makes sense that this and a lot of the other things that I was enjoying in like the dark wave, industrial, and gothic scenes was kind of similar.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And as far as first-person shooter soundtracks go, Quake and Quake 2 really influenced a lot of those soundtracks.
100%.
And that's where I'm getting, picking up all of those kind of notes from the Quake series in this. The original Unreal game was what I played the most. I don't think I played Tournament at all because I didn't have online back in the day anyway.
Right.
So the original Unreal soundtrack was more like a European electronic, a little smoother, a little brighter, a little dancier. So it didn't have all these kind of aggressive notes that the Tournament soundtrack did. So it's pretty cool to kind of compare and contrast the two.
Yeah. Peter Hodgba, unlike Rick Schaffer, I don't see a whole lot of things outside of video game music that he has done. Things that I will point out, he's done a lot of sound effects and stuff for the Max Payne games. And then he was apparently he must have been a composer for PopCap because he did a ton of PopCap stuff. Bejeweled 2, 3, Bejeweled Twist, PopCap arcade hits. And then just to add another interesting thing on top of that, Alan Wake. When the Alan Wake remake came out in like the 2010s, he was in on that, doing audio design and some of the music there. So
cool.
Interesting guy.
Very neat.
All right. We are rounding a corner soon, so what is next from your list?
All right. So this is, speaking of first-person shooters, a track called Dystopian Dimension by Andrew Holschult from the game Prodeus. This was a 2020 release. This will probably knock your industrial pants off as well.
Oh, heck yeah.
Welcome back to the VGM Machine. That was Dystopian Dimension from Andrew Hulsholt from the game Prodeus, released in 2020. Your subwoofers are probably now thanking you that the song is over.
Yeah. Oh no, my subwoofers enjoy constant work, so they will love this one. Oh man, really good pick from a really awesome soundtrack. I was trying to remember where I had heard about this from, and it was actually listener to both of our VGM shows, Alex Bessinger. Actually, in November 2022, Mike and I did a Patreon picks, and this game was his pick. The track Cables and Chaos specifically, which, I mean, they're both really good tracks. Everything.
I consider that one for this show, too.
Yeah. When I heard that track, I just went and grabbed the soundtrack. I went to Bandcamp, I bought it, I grabbed it, and I listened to it on the ride home from Mike's house. So I literally hadn't heard it before, heard the song, bought the soundtrack, and then listened to it on the way home, and it was fantastic.
Yeah, no, it's really good stuff from the first time, I think, and then you introduced it to me, and I was like, oh, all right, this is literally right up my alley, so I started listening to it as well. Fantastic stuff. This is like slickly produced industrial, and this is more along the lines of like what I would hear from maybe like Funk or Vote, some of those more veteran, especially like maybe it's a little more dubby than like Frontline Assembly might get nowadays, even though they did have their dubstep era back in the day. But it's got that kind of production quality to it, where everything just sounds really, really slick. Oh, Cell Dweller for sure. I think there's a lot of the instrumental stuff that Cell Dweller does sounds a lot like this as well. I'm just making parallels in case people out there want to find other bands that are similar to this music if they like it. But this one I think really starts shining towards the back half of the song where that bass starts dun 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 dun. Like it's a really, really powerful stuff and like one of my favorite parts of the song. And the whole soundtrack is like this. It's very energetic, very pump you up. If you're familiar with any of Mick Gordon's work from like the Doom games, Doom Eternal, this kind of rides on the coattails of that. As a matter of fact, Andrew Hulsholt, the composer, also worked on one of the DLCs for Doom Eternal. So once Mick Gordon kind of severed his ties with the makers of Doom, long story in and of itself, but they brought Hulsholt on because I think they felt that his style really kind of complemented what Mick Gordon had done for the original game's music as well. So, do you know anything about this game?
No. I just know it's got an awesome soundtrack.
So this is it's kind of a good thing that we're kind of like sharing two first-person shooter games back to back, because this one is a modern throwback to games like Unreal Tournament and Quake and Doom. It takes classic Windows 95, maybe more like Windows XP era aesthetics, but kind of uses modern lighting effects and reflections and stuff to make simpler maps, but that look really good and that have that same kind of action that Doom and Quake and Unreal did. So it's kind of a cross between a throwback and a modern AAA first-person shooter game. It's really good. It's really high energy, very, very fast. I mean, obviously you're listening to music like this. You're going to want the action to match what you're hearing coming out of your speakers. So it's definitely worth checking out. It goes on sale all the time if you're into that kind of thing. Andrew Hulsholt actually started off composing music for like Doom mods and add-ons and stuff, and was kind of discovered that way. He did an entire cover of the original Doom soundtrack, all of Bobby Prince's original music, like in this style. And so that's when companies started noticing him. 3D Realms noticed him and was like, hey, why don't you make some music for us? You're really good at what you do.
Nice.
So he ended up working on games like Rad Rogers, Medieval. Prodeus came out in 2020, and then after this he went on to do the Ancient Gods DLC for Doom Eternal with David Levy, composed the music for Quake Champions alongside Chris Vrenna, who was a former Nine Inch Nails member. And then he's got another game coming out sometime this year called Tokyo Underground Killer, which I'm really looking forward to.
Nice. Wow. Yeah. Very busy. Glad he's staying busy.
Yeah, and he's working with a lot of, really, really cool people and people whose music I already enjoy. So can't wait to hear what he comes out with next.
Nice. Same.
All right, man. I think this is your last track?
Yep.
All right, what you got?
So this is going to be from a game that came out in 2019 called Shakedown Hawaii. Matt Creamer is the composer on that whole game, and the track we're going to hear is called Obliterator.
So like it's a lullaby, right?
Yes. Alrighty, that was Obliterator from Shakedown Hawaii. It's a game that came out in 2019, and it was all done by Matt Creamer.
I'm fairly obliterated.
Yeah, I thought so. I like this song. This is actually one that stuck with me. So on XVGM Radio a few years ago, Mike and I interviewed Matt about this game. It wasn't in 2019. I think it might have been maybe actually towards the end of 2019. So it was a little while after the game came out. And we do what we normally do. We played a bunch of tracks. We talked to him about, his process. And I'm pretty sure, I'm 90% sure it was this track that made me reference Leather Strip and Covenant. It could have been one of the other tracks because most of the soundtrack does not sound like this. There are a few tracks that are relatively dark and kind of high paced like this, but the soundtrack for Shakedown Hawaii is more like it's kind of like a GTA clone type of a game.
Yeah, it's like it's a very synthwave soundtrack.
Yeah, exactly.
With a lot of retro elements too.
Yes, and I feel like this is one of the darker songs on the soundtrack. But I just remember that we talked about that all that stuff. I referenced like I said at one point Leather Strip and Covenant, and you had heard that episode and then went, "Hey, I didn't know you liked that music. You want to do a podcast about that kind of music with me?"
And here we are.
Yes. So like this is kind of takes me all the way back to that point in time where we were doing that, and then we started putting this show together over the course of a couple months. Then we released it in January 2020.
Yeah, right around the beginning of the year.
Yeah. So remember, and then like immediately that COVID thing happened, and was just like, hey, this is going to be difficult now.
Yeah, exactly. This was good. I think it still is more on the synthwave side than it is like industrial or anything like that. But it's definitely got that hard, aggressive kind of a Carpenter Brute feel to it, for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, as we got more into doing this show, and I learned about a lot of the other things and a lot of my misconceptions about gothic and or industrial music, it made me kind of think back to this track and what we were talking about. And I heard it again in this. There are parts like where it gets a little bit more minimal. There are parts that feel Covenant to me in those aspects. The rest of it, like I said, doesn't. It definitely feels more synthwave, and like you said, Carpenter Brute, and I agree. He had that kind of like deep running vibe that this kind of had. That just like chugga 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 that goes throughout the song. It's still one of my favorites from this game. As
far as Covenant goes, I've like United States of Mind, Northern Lights, like that era, I could definitely hear what you're talking about there.
Yeah. So that's I just kind of wanted to close out my stuff with a almost like a full circle back, or at least sharing a fun story that I don't think we've shared in the show before.
Sweet. Yeah, I had the pleasure of talking with Matt on my show with Mike before your show. Yeah. So we've each had the honor of interviewing him about some of his compositions, which is cool. And he's such a chameleon. Like he started off composing for like mobile games, in the style of like the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo and stuff, and now he's kind of doing much more higher budget games with giant soundtracks. The Shakedown Hawaii soundtrack is pretty darn big.
Yeah.
And I think it was 3 different composers that shared the original, what was it, Retro
City Rampage.
Retro City Rampage was the prequel to this game. There were 3 composers on that soundtrack, and then I think Matt took this entire soundtrack on by himself, right?
Yeah.
That's quite an undertaking, and he really knocked it out of the park.
I thought so. And I mean, just to go on about like his chameleonness, Mike and I recently re-interviewed him for his soundtrack on Slayin' 2. And I think that episode came out in December. It's on the XVGM website. If you like Matt Creamer or want to hear more of his stuff, like that soundtrack does not sound like this. Just kind of like I said, speaking to the chameleon aspect, he has a really good range and the ability to. You get the sounds of like you're saying, he was doing things that sounded like a Sega Genesis soundtrack or an SNES soundtrack. He's really good at doing that stuff, and his original compositions are fantastic as well. And he's a really cool guy. We've had him on XVGM for 2 regular episodes, and I think 1 or 2 Patreon episodes. Chill dude.
Yeah, very talkative.
Yes.
Chatterbox. But great stuff comes out of his mouth. He's very good at explaining his creative process, which I love.
100%.
All right, speaking of people with great creative processes, our last entry of the show is the one that I'm sure at least folks who know me from the VGM world are expecting, a track from Akira Yamaoka. Actually, I've played stuff from him on both shows, which is super cool. This is Mayheim 1 from the game Silent Hill 4, which was released in 2004. That was Mayhem 1 by Akira Yamaoka from the game Silent Hill 4, The Room, released in 2004. To my knowledge, there is no Mayhem 2, so I'm not sure why this is 1. However, Yamaoka has also added songs to his soundtracks that have Part 2 on them, but no Part 1 exists. So either they are songs that he just didn't end up putting on the soundtracks, or he's just being goofy. I don't really know.
I like the idea that maybe he's just being goofy.
Yeah, you never know. I wanted to pick a song from Yamaoka that kind of showed off a lot of his sounds, but maybe all combined into one, more or less. I felt this was a really good example of it because it has those amazing industrial beats, which he's really well known for, and probably the main reason I love him so much. It's got ethereal piano and very sweeping kind of keyboards. There's a little bit of flute that comes in there. That kind of arpeggiated bass keyboard line. It's very ominous and very kind of foreboding. I don't know. I just kind of love the whole way this track just comes together and then leaves out, like kind of turning up the levels on those synth knobs and making them a little bit grittier.
Yeah.
What's your take on his music? Because I don't think I've ever heard you really talk about any of Yamaoka's stuff in terms of like the Silent Hill soundtracks.
Yeah. So I was never really into the Silent Hill games, and I don't know that there's a lot of Yamaoka's music that's crossed my ears, at least in the wild anyway. Like in the controlled environment of podcasts, I know that I've heard a handful of his stuff, but I don't know that I've actually played a lot of games that Yamaoka's music has been in. That being said, this was really cool. So like, I haven't actually heard this song until now. I really dig that bass opening. Like I wouldn't call it buzzy. Like it's not really a buzzy bass, but it's got a quality to it that feels similar to me. And then the bass line itself, it's not, but for some reason at first my brain connected it to Spy Hunter on the NES.
Okay.
It's not, but it's just one of those things, like it had a similar progression, and so that's a connection my brain made, which, I laughed about briefly. But I think what I really enjoy about this track is the ethereal type stuff, like the stuff that makes it particularly spooky. Like the bass line makes it interesting. Like there's something there. I wouldn't call it spooky, but there is like an aspect of like being hunted, or something's not right. Like there's an eerie aspect to it. But the keys specifically, at first I thought I was hearing like a guitar, and the more I listened to it, I was like, no, that's definitely a synth that was going on kind of in the background, and everything gets pulled together as it goes on, because it builds and then kind of stays there for a while. And it just gets to this really creepy area, which, I mean, again, I wouldn't have heard the song had I not played the game, or had you not played it here. And I feel like it works really well in the type of games that Silent Hill is. I don't know if it's a song that I would go to like off the shelf, but it was definitely a fun thing to sit into. Yeah, no,
I agree with your assessment of the listening to it on its own. For most people, not for me. Me, I live and breathe this stuff.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, the environments in Silent Hill are so terrifying at times. The music complements it so well. And the music that you hear off the soundtrack isn't always necessarily the form that you hear it in the game itself. Generally it'll be more atmospheric or more dynamic to go along with the action in the game, and then you'll have more of a mixed down kind of these are all the elements kind of put together in a song kind of situation where you have on the soundtrack itself. That being said, there's ambient ethereal stuff. Like Yamaoka's a really big fan of Angelo Badalamenti, circling back to the David Lynch stuff. May he rest in peace. Not David Lynch, Badalamenti. But, you get that kind of like ethereal keys and piano stuff going on, but then you also have these really gritty, kind of angry monster chasing you down the hallway kind of music. And then everything kind of in between. Like this one doesn't really have a like monster chasing you down the hallway. For me, this is just like you're exploring a really scary place. Or it almost has a feeling of like nostalgia with those keyboards, but it's like a place that I remember, but it's scarier than I remember it being. That's maybe it's tainted by the atmosphere of the game itself, but
right.
That's the feeling I always get from listening to this particular piece. Anyway, Yamaoka has been a stalwart on the Silent Hill series all the way up until Silent Hill 5, where he left the publishers of Silent Hill, Konami, and he moved on to Grasshopper Manufacturer, where he did games like No More Heroes, Shadows of the Damned, Lollipop Chainsaw, stuff like that. Those soundtracks are a little bit more metal. Like, he does a lot of metal stuff, too. He's actually married to a drummer in a metal band in Japan called Nemophilia, which is kind of cool. A lot of influence from there as well, but he also counts Massive Attack, Metallica, Depeche Mode, and Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails as his main influences, and I do hear a lot of that in a lot of his songs as well. So, and he studied to become an interior designer. He has no musical formal training whatsoever. He just kind of knocked on Konami's door one day and is like, "Hey, can I make video game music?" And they gave him a try, and he worked out, and there he is. So I always thought that was really cool, and why his music, I think, is so unique and kind of outside the bounds of what normal composers do, is because he just came up with it on his own. He didn't have those rules to play by because he didn't know the rules to begin with. So I thought that was really, really cool. And then he also does like regular kind of rock band stuff too with vocals. Every Silent Hill game has also had several vocal tracks, usually working with voice actress Mary Elizabeth McGlynn on vocals, and Joe Ramersa, who plays drums and also does kind of Bowie-esque vocals as well. So there's lots of just vocal rock songs alongside all this really cool industrial and ethereal stuff that he's got. So another chameleon.
Yeah, nice. Actually, that just made me realize, I think all of these tracks, I don't think there's lyrics in any of them. So that's going to make...
well, except for the Trüberbrook one, of course.
Oh, yep, there you go. There it is. I'm like, there's got to be something I'm missing. And technically...
the Warhammer 40K track has lyrics that they're more like vocal instruments, I guess, than lyrics itself.
But so I was going to say that's going to make this episode a lot easier for you to put together because you don't have to remove the vocals from any of this.
We'll just have to yell over all the banging and clanging.
But yeah, no, that's really cool.
Yeah. All right, that pretty much wraps up the show. Wow, we had a lot of really cool music this time around. I love sharing stuff like this because this is like, it's my bread and butter, and I like having it all kind of all in one place and a reason to play it. I do know, we have a few industrial music fans on the show, or who listen to the show, so I'm curious what your folks' favorite music was. Any new standouts for you, Justin?
Good question.
You can say no. You can say you hated everything. That's totally fine.
I hated it all, even my own stuff. No, I mean, Jesper Kyd, I knew of, and I did not know that he had done the Warhammer game. So I'm actually probably going to check out that soundtrack because that was a really cool track. I mean, Then I'll Make You Mine by the band from Another Place. I don't know that we're really going to find anything specifically in that realm, but that was...
I can give you the full 12.5-minute version of the song if you want.
That would be kind of cool, actually. But yeah, that one was more of just a cool situation. I mean, so there may not really be anything more to kind of dig into there, but I mean, that was definitely a standout just as far as like the track goes. I mean, you found something that was kind of gothy, and it's always kind of what I try to add to the show, and I couldn't really find anything video game music that was gothy without just using licensed music from Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really cool find.
Yeah, and a very lucky find as well. It just literally dropped in my lap while I was playing the game. Same with that Kentucky Route Zero song, too. Just not expecting to find it and then falling in love with it. So, but that was great stuff. As far as your stuff goes, yeah, I really did like that Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines track. I think, was there a prequel to that game? Like, long time ago?
I don't think it was technically a prequel. There are a number of Vampire the Masquerade video games.
Okay.
So there have been since, and there were others before. I'm trying to remember what the one from like the mid '90s was. It was Vampire the Masquerade.
I think I had that one.
It started with a B, and it wasn't Bloodlines. But yeah, you might be thinking of that.
Blood Buddies.
Blood Buddies.
It's a co-op game.
Yes. Oh man, that would be. I would play that.
Yeah, but I think I remember having that one way back in the day, and it was a little more RPG-ish than I wanted it to be, so I didn't really get that into it. But, maybe I'll check out this new Masquerade game that you said is coming out eventually at some point, Bloodlines 2.
Yeah. It was, like I said, it was supposed to be out in, 2022. I think it's been postponed to, later in this year, or maybe next year. Who knows? All I know is those of us that really enjoyed Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines have been, salivating for this for a long time. And when it was finally announced it was finally happening, a lot of us kind of lost our minds. So
awesome. Another kind of, a runner-up, or music that I kind of was excited to share on this, but isn't actually technically out yet, is the new Mick Gordon soundtrack coming out for Atomic Heart, which I'm really looking forward to. Kind of a story-based first-person shooter, but with his music. And there are snippets online, but they're all low quality and kind of taken from trailers and stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that actual full soundtrack coming out so I can share more of it in the future, because I was hoping to share some Mick Gordon stuff that, but everybody's heard the Doom stuff, and the Killer Instinct stuff that he did doesn't kind of fits, but it's more dubby and dancey than industrial. Yeah. So I felt like the stuff that I had was probably a better fit than that stuff. But Mick Gordon's really made a name for himself as far as industrial metal goes in video games at this point. So anyways, let's wrap up the show. As usual, I'd like to thank Indira J for all of the podcast artwork, and Trevin Hughes for the podcast theme song, as well as all of our lovely, lovely patrons who have stuck with me for going on 4 years now. Yep, starting off at Artura's level, Cameron Childs, and Dan Lawton the Phantomire. At our VGMbassy tier, Chris Murray, Chris Myers, Gannon 11, Keyglyph, Kyle Kroll, The Dyad, Daryl Bowers, The Last Recon, and Tom Hunt. Our audio attaché members, Cameron Worma, Carlito from the Heroes 3 podcast, and Scott McElhone, and our special agent, Ryan Steele. Thank you very much, guys, as usual, for all of your support. And, as I said, we are kind of redistricting our Patreon, as we've just made our Patreon show public. So look for that in the VGMbassy feed. You're going to start seeing Embassy exclusives showing up alongside the regular VGMbassy shows, and then we're going to get different goodies for the Patreon folks, as well as more ways to participate in the Embassy exclusive shows. So look forward to that, and we will be back. We'll have one more Embassy exclusive show for this month in March, and then we'll be back with another VGMbassy at the beginning of April. All right, so everybody stay safe. Keep listening to Awesome VGM. Justin, thank you so much for hanging out and doing a double duty show with me tonight.
Thanks for having me.
As always. And we've got an idea for another VGMbassy show coming up soon, too, with VR games. So I think that'll be a lot of fun.
Yes.
I'm finding it's difficult to get VR game soundtracks, so we'll have to kind of dig around.
I found the same problem, actually.
Yeah, so we'll have to maybe work together, and I'm pretty good at digging into game files, as I've demonstrated, so we'll see what goes on with that. Anyways, thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time. Peace out.